I came home earlier than usual and froze in shock when I heard the entire conversation between my wife and my best friend. The front door clicked shut behind me, and I heard voices from the kitchen, Alma's laugh mixing with Victor's deeper chuckle. Something about their tone made me pause in the hallway instead of announcing my arrival. "We will leave him with nothing," Alma said, her voice carrying that cold calculation I'd been hearing more often lately. "Cedric thinks he's so smart with his little tech consulting business, but he has no idea what's coming." My hand instinctively reached for my phone. 43 years old, and I was about to record my own wife plotting against me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my career troubleshooting other people's problems, and now I was documenting my own personal system failure. "The timing has to be perfect," Victor replied. I could picture him leaning against my kitchen counter, probably drinking my coffee while planning my downfall. 25 years of friendship, and this was how it ended. "Your boss thinks you're working late on the Morrison case, right?" "Every Tuesday and Thursday," Alma confirmed. "Cedric never questions it. He's too busy with his computers to notice when I'm actually here versus when I'm at the office." I pressed record and moved closer to the kitchen doorway, staying hidden behind the corner. The hardwood floor creaked slightly under my weight, but they were too absorbed in their scheming to notice. "The prenup is the biggest obstacle," Alma continued. "But if we can prove he's been hiding assets or show some kind of misconduct, we can challenge it. I've been going through his files, looking for anything we can use." Victor laughed. "You always were the smart one. Remember in high school when you helped me cheat on that chemistry test? Same energy, different target." "This isn't cheating, Vic. This is survival. I've worked too hard building my law career to let Cedric's midlife crisis drag me down. He's been distant for months, probably planning to leave me anyway. We're just beating him to the punch." The casual way she discussed dismantling our 18-year marriage made my stomach turn. I kept the phone steady, making sure the audio was clear. In my line of work, documentation was everything. Apparently that skill set was about to become very relevant to my personal life. "What about Ellie?" Victor asked, referring to our 22-year-old daughter. "She's on my side," Alma said without hesitation. "I've been telling her how her father's been acting strange. Working late, probably having some kind of breakdown. She thinks he needs help, and she trusts my judgment about what's best for the family." That stung worse than the rest. Our daughter, manipulated into taking sides before she even knew there were sides to take. I'd been working extra hours lately, trying to build up the business, thinking I was securing our future. Instead, I'd been handing Alma ammunition for her character assassination. "The house is the real prize," Alma continued. "It's worth $400,000 now, and it's in both our names. If I can stay here and force him out, I can claim abandonment. Make it look like he walked away from his responsibilities." "What about his business accounts?" Victor asked. "That's where you come in. You're his business partner on the Morrison project, right? You have access to those financial records. If we can show some irregularities, maybe some missing funds." I'd heard enough. Actually, I'd heard too much, but the recording was gold. I backed away from the kitchen, moving carefully toward the front door. My hands were shaking as I stopped the recording and immediately uploaded it to 3 different cloud services. 20 years in IT had taught me the value of redundant backups. Outside, I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, staring at my phone screen. The audio file was there, time-stamped and geotagged. Alma's voice was crystal clear. "We will leave him with nothing." Victor's agreement was equally damning. They'd handed me everything I needed to destroy their little conspiracy. But first, I needed more evidence. I needed to see those notes Alma mentioned, and I needed to secure my own assets before they could move against me. The element of surprise was my only advantage, and I wasn't going to waste it. I drove around the block twice, then parked at the corner market. From there, I could see our house and Victor's silver BMW in the driveway. They were still inside, probably celebrating their brilliant plan. I gave them another hour, then watched Victor leave. He drove past me without noticing, probably heading home to his bachelor pad across town. When I returned to the house, Alma was in the shower. I could hear the water running upstairs. Perfect. I went straight to the kitchen table where she'd been sitting. There, spread across the surface like evidence at a crime scene, were handwritten notes in Alma's careful script. Timeline. File in 6 weeks. Cedric's business trip to Denver. Perfect opportunity. Establish pattern of abandonment. Assets. House, joint. Checking, joint. Savings, joint. His business accounts. Victor has access. Retirement funds. Mine separate. His joint. Strategy. Prove misconduct or hidden assets to void prenup. Victor's testimony about suspicious business dealings. Ellie's statement about father's erratic behavior. I photographed every page, making sure the handwriting was clear and the date stamps visible. Then I photographed the laptop screen, which showed a draft email to her divorce attorney. The subject line read, "Preparing to file, evidence attached." The email detailed their entire strategy, including specific dates and Victor's role in accessing my business files. It was a complete confession, written in Alma's own words. She'd even included a timeline showing how they planned to manipulate Ellie's testimony and use Victor's business relationship with me to suggest financial impropriety. That night, while Alma slept beside me, I worked. I exported every bank statement from the past 2 years, downloaded complete records from all our shared accounts, and created forensic copies of every relevant document. I also found the original prenuptial agreement and reviewed its fraud protection clauses. The prenup was ironclad. If either party conspired to defraud the other or engaged in adultery with a mutual friend, the innocent party retained all marital assets. Alma had helped draft that clause herself, back when we still trusted each other. The irony was perfect. By sunrise, I had everything packaged and sent to my attorney. I also revoked Alma's access to my business accounts and changed every password she might have known. The conspiracy they'd planned so carefully was about to become their downfall. I made coffee and sat at the same kitchen table where they'd plotted against me. The notes were gone now, probably filed away in Alma's office, but I had copies of everything, and more importantly, I had their own words condemning them. When Alma came downstairs, she kissed my cheek and asked about my day. I smiled and told her it was going to be interesting. She had no idea how interesting things were about to become. The next morning, I beat Alma to the courthouse by 30 minutes. My attorney, Janet Morrison, had everything ready. The divorce filing included the audio recording, photographs of the handwritten notes, and screenshots of the draft email. We also filed for an immediate asset freeze based on evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. "This is exceptional documentation, Cedric," Janet said as we walked up the courthouse steps. "I've never seen a case where the opposing party provided such complete evidence of their own misconduct." "Alma always was thorough," I replied. "She just never expected to be on the wrong side of her own documentation standards." The clerk stamped our filing at 8:47 a.m. By 9:15, the asset freeze was in place. Every joint account, every shared investment, even the house itself was now under court protection. Alma couldn't move a penny without judicial approval. I was back home before Alma left for work. She was in the kitchen, making her usual breakfast smoothie, completely unaware that her entire world had just shifted. I sat at the table with my laptop, pretending to check emails. "You're up early today," she said, not looking at me. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." "Anything I can help with?" The question was almost funny. "Actually, yes. We need to talk tonight. There are some things we need to discuss about our future." She paused, and I caught a flicker of something in her expression. Guilt? Fear? It was hard to tell. "Of course. I'll be home by 7. We can order takeout and have a proper conversation." After she left, I called Victor. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful and unsuspecting. "Cedric, what's up, buddy?" "I need to see you today. There's something important we need to discuss about the Morrison project." "Sure thing. My office or yours?" "Actually, let's meet at Murphy's gym. I need to blow off some steam and we can talk afterward." Murphy's was perfect for what I had in mind. Public enough to prevent any real confrontation, but private enough for a serious conversation. Plus, the boxing ring in the back would remind Victor that I wasn't just a computer nerd who spent his days behind a desk. Victor arrived at the gym looking confused. I was already warmed up, hitting the heavy bag with steady, measured punches. He watched me work for a minute before speaking. "You're really going at it today. Everything okay?" I stopped and turned to face him. "Actually, no. Everything is not okay. We have a problem, Vic." "What kind of problem?" Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and played the recording. His voice filled the space between us. "You always were the smart one. Remember in high school when you helped me cheat on that chemistry test? Same energy, different target." The color drained from his face. "Cedric, I can explain." "You can explain how you've been helping my wife plan to defraud me? You can explain how you were going to testify that I've been hiding assets? Please, I'd love to hear that explanation." He backed up a step, bumping into the weight rack. "It's not what it sounds like." "Really?" "Because it sounds like my best friend and my wife have been plotting to destroy me. It sounds like you've been using your access to my business accounts to gather ammunition for her divorce case. It sounds like you've been lying to my face for months while planning to stab me in the back. Alma said you were planning to leave her anyway. She said you'd been acting strange, staying out late, probably having an affair. She was just protecting herself." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Protecting herself by committing fraud? By manipulating our daughter? By conspiring with my business partner to fabricate evidence against me? Victor looked around the gym nervously. A few other people were working out, but nobody was paying attention to our conversation. Yet. What do you want from me, Cedric? I want you to understand something very clearly. The game is over. I filed for divorce this morning. I have recordings of your conversation, photographs of Alma's notes, copies of her emails. The court has frozen all our assets pending investigation of fraud charges. His eyes widened. Fraud charges? The prenup has very specific language about conspiracy and adultery. Alma wrote those clauses herself. Ironic, isn't it? Look, maybe we can work something out. Maybe there's a way to... There's no we anymore, Vic. There's no working anything out. You made your choice when you decided to betray 25 years of friendship for a chance to help Alma screw me over. I stepped closer, and he flinched. Good. He should be afraid. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to stay away from my house. You're going to have no contact with my family whatsoever. And if I find out you're still conspiring against me, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you really are. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm informing you. There's a difference. I walked away, leaving him standing there among the weights and workout equipment. The conversation had gone exactly as I'd planned. He was scared, confused, and isolated. Perfect. That evening, Alma came home at exactly 7 o'clock. She'd stopped for Chinese food, her usual peace offering when she sensed tension. Too little, too late. How was your day? She asked, setting the takeout containers on the kitchen table. Eventful. I had some interesting conversations. She opened the containers and started serving food onto plates. About what? About us? About our future? About the choices we've made? Something in my tone made her look up. Cedric, you're starting to worry me. You've been acting strange lately. Strange how? Distant, secretive, like you're planning something. I almost smiled. She was projecting her own behavior onto me, assuming I was as duplicitous as she was. Actually, you're right. I have been planning something. I've been planning to save my marriage. Relief flickered across her face. Oh, well, that's good. I want to save it too. I'm sure you do. That's why you've been meeting with Victor every Tuesday and Thursday, planning how to leave me with nothing. The chopsticks fell from her hand, clattering onto the plate. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Her own voice filled the kitchen. We will leave him with nothing. Cedric thinks he's so smart with his little tech consulting business, but he has no idea what's coming. She sat down hard, her face pale. Where did you get that? I recorded it yesterday, right here in our kitchen, while you and my best friend plotted my destruction. You were spying on me. I was protecting myself, and it's a good thing I was, considering what you were planning. She tried to recover, shifting into lawyer mode. That recording was made without my consent. It's not admissible in court. Actually, it is. This is a one-party consent state, and I was present during the conversation. Plus, the recording just supports the written evidence you so helpfully left on this very table. I showed her the photographs of her handwritten notes. Her strategy, timeline, and asset list, all in her own careful script. Cedric, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I filed for divorce this morning. The court has frozen all our assets pending investigation of your conspiracy with Victor. The prenup you helped write is now protecting me from the fraud you plan to commit. She stared at the photographs, her legal mind probably calculating her options. There weren't many. What do you want? She finally asked. I want you to understand that the game is over. I want you to know that your brilliant plan has backfired spectacularly. And I want you to realize that you've lost everything you were trying to steal from me. The Chinese food sat untouched between us, growing cold. Outside, the sun was setting on our marriage and on any pretense of civility between us. The war had begun, and I'd fired the first shot. Alma had always prided herself on being the smartest person in the room. Tonight, she was learning what it felt like to be outmaneuvered by someone she'd underestimated. The lesson was just beginning. Word travels fast in a town like ours, especially when it involves lawyers, divorce, and betrayal. By the end of the week, half the neighborhood knew that Alma Fallon was facing fraud allegations in her divorce case. The other half knew that Victor Kessel had been caught conspiring with his best friend's wife. I didn't have to spread the gossip myself. Small towns are efficient information networks, and the truth has a way of finding its own path. Still, I helped things along when necessary. Cedric, I heard about you and Alma, said Mrs. Patterson from next door, cornering me while I was checking my mailbox. I'm so sorry. I never would have expected something like this from her. It's been a difficult time, I replied, playing the part of the wounded husband. Finding out that the people you trust most have been working against you, it changes everything. And Victor, too. I can't believe he would do such a thing. You two have been friends since childhood. 25 years of friendship, and he threw it away to help my wife commit fraud. It makes you wonder who you can really trust. Mrs. Patterson nodded sympathetically. If there's anything I can do to help? Actually, there is something. If anyone asks about Alma's behavior lately, about whether she's been acting strangely or having unusual visitors, I'd appreciate your honesty. The court case depends on establishing a pattern of deceptive behavior. She understood immediately. Mrs. Patterson had lived next door for 15 years and had seen Victor's car in our driveway on those Tuesday and Thursday evenings when I was supposedly working late. She'd also noticed Alma's increasingly expensive clothes and jewelry, purchases that didn't match our declared income. By Monday morning, Alma's law firm had received several anonymous tips about her ethical violations and potential conflicts of interest. I had nothing to do with those tips, of course. I was just a heartbroken husband trying to rebuild his life. Victor's situation was more delicate. As the general manager of Morrison Motors, he had a reputation to maintain. His customers trusted him to be honest and reliable. Learning that he'd been conspiring to commit fraud would damage that trust significantly. I didn't attack Victor directly. Instead, I made sure the right people heard the right information at the right time. A casual conversation with Tom Morrison, the dealership owner, a friendly chat with Victor's ex-wife Linda, who still had connections throughout the community, a few strategic comments at Murphy's gym, where Victor's colleagues often worked out. I still can't believe Vic would do something like that, said Danny Walsh, one of the gym regulars. He always seemed like such a straight shooter. People surprise you, I replied, adjusting the weights on the bench press. You think you know someone, and then you find out they've been lying to your face for months? What exactly did he do? He was helping my wife access my business accounts, looking for evidence she could use against me in divorce court. She was planning to claim I'd been hiding assets or embezzling money. Victor was going to testify that he'd witnessed a suspicious financial activity. Danny whistled low. That's fraud, isn't it? The court seems to think so. They've frozen all our assets pending investigation. Alma's facing potential disbarment, and Victor could face criminal charges for conspiracy. The conversation was overheard by several other gym members, including 2 of Victor's customers and 1 of his employees. By Tuesday afternoon, the story had reached Tom Morrison, who called Victor into his office for a private conversation about maintaining the dealership's reputation during difficult times. Meanwhile, Alma was discovering that her professional life was becoming increasingly complicated. Her boss, Margaret Hendricks, had received those anonymous tips about ethical violations. The firm's policy was clear. Any attorney facing fraud allegations would be suspended pending resolution of the case. This is temporary, Alma told me when she came home early on Tuesday. Margaret has to follow protocol, but once this misunderstanding is cleared up, I'll be back to work. Misunderstanding. You know what I mean. Once we resolve this divorce situation amicably, the fraud allegations will disappear. I looked up from my laptop. There's nothing amicable about fraud, Alma. There's nothing amicable about conspiracy. And there's nothing amicable about betraying your husband with his best friend. I never betrayed you with Victor. We're just friends. Friends who meet secretly twice a week to plan how to defraud me out of my assets? She sat down across from me, trying to look reasonable. We were protecting ourselves. You've been acting strangely for months, working late, being secretive. We thought you were planning to leave me. So you decided to leave me first, but take everything I own in the process? The house is in both our names. The accounts are joint. I have as much right to them as you do. You have no right to commit fraud to get them. You have no right to conspire with my business partner to fabricate evidence against me, and you certainly have no right to manipulate our daughter into taking sides in your scheme. That last point hit home. Ellie had been calling me daily since the divorce filing, confused and upset about the allegations against her mother. Alma had been feeding her a steady diet of lies about my supposed misconduct, and now Ellie didn't know what to believe. Ellie loves us both, Alma said carefully. She doesn't want to see our family destroyed. Our family was destroyed the moment you decided to conspire against me. Everything that's happening now is just the aftermath. The next morning, I received a call from Janet Morrison, my attorney. Cedric, we need to talk. Alma's lawyer wants to negotiate a settlement. What kind of settlement? They're offering to drop their claims against the house and the business accounts in exchange for you dropping the fraud allegations. Absolutely not. I thought you'd say that, but I had to present the offer. There's something else, though. They're claiming you've been harassing Victor and interfering with Alma's employment. I laughed. Harassing Victor how? by telling people the truth about what he did? They're saying you've been spreading false information designed to damage their reputations. There's nothing false about it. I have recordings, photographs, and written evidence of their conspiracy. Everything I've told people is documented fact. I know that, and you know that, but they're trying to paint you as vindictive and unstable. They want to shift the narrative from their misconduct to your response to their misconduct. It was a smart strategy, I had to admit. Make the victim into the aggressor. Turn the person who'd been wronged into the person causing problems. Classic legal maneuvering. What do you recommend? Keep doing what you're doing, but be careful about how you do it. Don't make any direct accusations. Don't contact Victor or Alma directly. Let the evidence speak for itself, and let other people draw their own conclusions. That evening, I decided to test Alma's resolve. I had one more card to play, and it was time to see how she'd react when the pressure really started building. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, I told her over dinner, about resolving this amicably. Hope flickered in her eyes. And? I'm willing to consider a settlement, but only if you're completely honest with me about everything. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more conspiracy with Victor. What do you want to know? I want to know how long you've been planning this. I want to know whose idea it was. And I want to know exactly what you were going to do with the money once you'd stolen it from me. She hesitated, calculating her response. It wasn't stealing. The assets are marital property. The conspiracy to fabricate evidence was stealing. The plan to void our prenup through fraud was stealing. The manipulation of our daughter was stealing her relationship with her father. Cedric, please, can't we find a way to work this out? We could have worked it out 6 months ago before you started plotting against me. We could have worked it out 3 months ago before you involved Victor in your scheme. We could have worked it out last week before you tried to manipulate Ellie into testifying against me. I stood up from the table. But we can't work it out now. You made your choice when you decided to leave me with nothing. Now you'll have to live with the consequences of that choice. As I walked away, I heard her whisper something that sounded like, "I'm sorry." But it was too late for apologies. The war had moved beyond the possibility of peaceful resolution. Tomorrow, I would play my final card. Tomorrow, Alma would learn that underestimating me had been the biggest mistake of her life. Thursday morning brought news that changed everything. Victor's employment at Morrison Motors had been restructured due to concerns about judgment and professional conduct. He wasn't fired outright, but his responsibilities were reduced and his access to financial records was revoked. Tom Morrison couldn't afford to keep someone with questionable ethics in a position of trust. I learned about Victor's demotion from Danny Walsh at the gym. Tom had to do something, Danny explained while we spotted each other on the bench press. Too many customers were asking questions about Victor's involvement in your divorce case. Bad for business. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied, though I wasn't sorry at all. Victor made his own choices. Now he has to live with them. Word is, he's pretty angry about the whole situation, blaming you for his problems instead of taking responsibility for what he did. That was interesting. An angry Victor was a potentially reckless Victor, and reckless people made mistakes. I filed that information away for future use. Meanwhile, Alma's situation was deteriorating rapidly. The suspension from her law firm had become indefinite pending the outcome of the fraud investigation. Without her income, she was struggling to pay her legal fees. Her attorney was competent but expensive, and the retainer was running out fast. I need access to our joint savings account, she told me that evening. Just enough to cover my legal expenses. The court froze those accounts, remember. You can petition for emergency funds, but you'll have to justify the expense. My legal fees are directly related to this case. The court should approve reasonable attorney costs. Reasonable costs for defending against fraud charges that you actually committed? That's going to be a tough sell. She was getting desperate, and desperate people made poor decisions. I was counting on that. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Victor's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. Cedric, we need to talk. This has gone far enough. You're destroying people's lives over a misunderstanding. Call me back. I didn't call him back. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to my attorney with a note. Evidence of continued contact despite warnings to stay away. Saturday morning, Victor showed up at my house. I watched him through the window as he paced on my front porch, working up the courage to ring the doorbell. When he finally did, I answered with my phone already recording. What do you want, Victor? I want to end this madness. You've cost me my job, my reputation, my friends. Enough is enough. You cost yourself those things when you decided to conspire against me. It wasn't conspiracy. Alma was scared and confused, and I was trying to help a friend. By helping her commit fraud? by helping her protect herself from what she thought was your plan to abandon her. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Let me explain something to you, Victor. I never planned to abandon anyone. I never planned to hide assets or leave Alma with nothing. I was working extra hours to build up the business so we could afford Ellie's graduate school and maybe take that trip to Europe that Alma always talked about. His face showed confusion, but she said, she lied, just like she lied about everything else, just like you lied when you pretended to be my friend while plotting behind my back. I was your friend. I am your friend. Friends don't conspire to destroy each other, Victor. Friends don't help wives commit fraud against their husbands. Friends don't fabricate evidence or manipulate testimony. Maybe we can fix this. Maybe if we all sit down together. There's nothing to fix. You and Alma made your choices. Now you live with the consequences. He grabbed my arm as I turned to go back inside. You can't just destroy people's lives like this. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. Take your hand off me, Victor. He let go, but didn't back down. This isn't over. You're right, it's not over. It's just getting started. I went back inside and immediately called the police to report the unwanted contact and veiled threat. The officer who took the report was sympathetic and professional. He made note of Victor's violation of my request for no contact and his implied threat. Another piece of evidence for the growing file. Sunday evening, Alma received a call that changed everything. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it was enough to understand what was happening. What do you mean, additional evidence? What kind of evidence? A long pause. That's impossible. I never wrote anything like that. Another pause, longer this time. I need to see these documents immediately. Can you email them to me? When she hung up, her face was pale. My attorney found additional evidence in the discovery materials, documents I supposedly wrote, outlining a more detailed plan to defraud you. What kind of documents? Financial projections showing how we plan to hide assets after the divorce. Correspondence with Victor about manipulating business records, even a timeline for moving money to offshore accounts. I frowned, looking concerned. That sounds serious. Did you write those documents? Of course not. I never planned anything like that. Someone must have fabricated them. Who would do something like that? She stared at me suspiciously. You tell me. Are you suggesting I fabricated evidence against you? That would be illegal, Alma. I'm not the one facing fraud charges here. But she was right to be suspicious. I had fabricated those additional documents using her writing style and the same planning methodology she'd used for the original conspiracy. The fake evidence was carefully crafted to look authentic while being just outrageous enough to make her real crimes seem moderate by comparison. It was a calculated risk. If the fabricated documents were discovered, I could claim they were part of Alma's original plan that I'd found on her computer. If they weren't discovered, they would make her legitimate crimes seem like part of a much larger conspiracy. Either way, they served my purpose, increasing the pressure on Alma and Victor until one of them made a critical mistake. Monday morning brought that mistake. Victor, panicked by the escalating legal situation and angry about his demotion, did something incredibly stupid. He tried to break into my house to steal the evidence I had against him. I wasn't home when it happened, but the security system I'd installed captured everything. Victor used a spare key that Alma must have given him, thinking he could get in and out without being detected. He went straight to my home office, searching for the original recordings and photographs. What he didn't know was that I'd moved all the physical evidence to a safety deposit box weeks ago. What he found instead was a laptop rigged with a motion-activated camera and a folder labeled Victor's Betrayal that contained copies of everything I had on him. The security footage showed him finding the folder, opening it, and then smashing the laptop in a rage. He also destroyed several other items in the office, including framed photos and some expensive computer equipment. When I returned home and discovered the break-in, I called the police immediately. The responding officers reviewed the security footage and issued a warrant for Victor's arrest. Breaking and entering, destruction of property, and violation of the no-contact order I'd filed after his threatening visit. Victor was arrested at his apartment that evening. The local newspaper ran a small story about the incident, identifying him as a local businessman arrested for breaking into his former friend's home during a contentious divorce case. The arrest was the final blow to Victor's reputation. Tom Morrison fired him outright, citing the criminal charges and the damage to the dealership's image. Victor's ex-wife, Linda, made sure everyone in their social circle knew about the arrest and the circumstances behind it. Alma was devastated. With Victor facing criminal charges, her co-conspirator had become a liability rather than an asset. Worse, his desperate break-in attempt made their entire conspiracy look more serious and premeditated. This is insane, she told me when she got home from the police station, where she'd been questioned about Victor's access to our house. Victor has lost his mind. I never told him to break into our home. Our home? I thought you were planning to take it from me. That was different. That was a legal proceeding. This is criminal behavior. Like conspiracy to commit fraud? She didn't answer. Instead, she went upstairs to pack a bag. I'm staying at my sister's house until this situation is resolved. Probably a good idea. The neighbors are starting to talk, and your association with a criminal isn't helping your case. As she packed, I reflected on how perfectly everything was falling into place. Alma and Victor had started this war thinking they could outmaneuver me through legal manipulation and social pressure. Instead, they'd underestimated their opponent and overestimated their own abilities. Now Victor was facing criminal charges, Alma was suspended from her job and running out of money, and I controlled all the evidence that would determine their fate. The trap I'd set had sprung exactly as planned, but I wasn't finished with them yet. The final phase of my revenge was still to come, and it would be more devastating than anything they'd experienced so far. 3 weeks after Victor's arrest, I received an unexpected invitation. Margaret Hendricks, Alma's boss at the law firm, was hosting her annual charity fundraiser at her lakeside mansion. The event supported the local women's shelter, a cause I'd contributed to for years. My invitation was perfectly legitimate, though my reasons for attending were anything but charitable. Alma would be there, despite her suspension. Margaret had made it clear that the firm's partners were expected to attend, regardless of their current employment status. It was a test of loyalty and social standing, and Alma couldn't afford to fail it. Victor would also be there. His ex-wife Linda was on the charity's board of directors, and she'd made sure he received an invitation. Not out of kindness, but because she wanted the community to see how far he'd fallen. Linda had always been vindictive, and Victor's recent troubles had given her the perfect opportunity for revenge. The stage was set for a final confrontation, but not the kind Alma and Victor were expecting. I had one last surprise for them, and it would end their conspiracy permanently. Saturday evening, I arrived at Margaret's mansion fashionably late. The party was in full swing, with about 60 guests mingling on the terrace overlooking the lake. I spotted Alma immediately, standing near the bar with a forced smile, trying to maintain her professional relationships despite the scandals surrounding her. Victor was harder to find. I eventually located him on the far side of the terrace, nursing a drink and avoiding eye contact with the other guests. His arrest had made him a social pariah, and his presence at the party was clearly unwelcome. I made my rounds, greeting old friends and accepting their condolences about my divorce. Everyone was sympathetic to my situation, and several people made pointed comments about trust and betrayal. The social consensus was clear. Cedric Fallon was the wronged party, and his wife and former best friend were the villains. "Cedric, I'm so glad you came," Margaret Hendricks said, approaching me near the buffet table. "How are you holding up through all this?" "It's been difficult, but I'm managing. The truth has a way of coming out, and that's been comforting. I want you to know that the firm doesn't condone Alma's behavior. The suspension will remain in place until all legal matters are resolved." "I appreciate that, Margaret. Professional ethics matter, especially in the legal profession." She nodded approvingly. "If there's anything I can do to help with your situation, please let me know." "Actually, there is something. I have some additional evidence that might interest the legal community. Information about the extent of the conspiracy against me." Her eyes sharpened with interest. "What kind of information?" "Documentation showing that this wasn't just a divorce scheme. It was a broader pattern of professional misconduct, involving the manipulation of client funds and the fabrication of legal documents." I was stretching the truth, but Margaret didn't know that. She was imagining the headlines, the damage to her firm's reputation, the potential lawsuits from affected clients. "Do you have this documentation with you?" "As some of it. Would you like to see?" She nodded, and I led her to a quiet corner of the terrace. There, I showed her the fabricated documents I'd created, the ones that made Alma's conspiracy look like part of a larger pattern of fraud. Margaret's face grew increasingly grim as she reviewed the papers. "This is very serious, Cedric. If these documents are authentic, Alma could face criminal charges beyond the divorce case." "I believe they are authentic. The handwriting matches her other notes, and the timeline corresponds with several suspicious transactions I've discovered in our joint accounts. I need to make some phone calls. The State Bar Association should be notified immediately." As Margaret walked away with copies of the documents, I felt a moment of satisfaction. The fabricated evidence would never hold up under serious scrutiny, but it didn't need to. It just needed to create enough doubt and concern to destroy what remained of Alma's professional reputation. Around 9 o'clock, I noticed Victor approaching me. He looked terrible, his face gaunt and his clothes wrinkled. The stress of the criminal charges and social ostracism was clearly taking its toll. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "I don't think that's a good idea, Victor. You're facing criminal charges for breaking into my house. Any contact between us could be seen as witness intimidation." "I'm not trying to intimidate anyone. I just want to understand why you're doing this." "I'm not doing anything. I'm simply responding to what you and Alma did to me." "We never meant for things to go this far. You meant to defraud me out of everything I own. You meant to destroy my relationship with my daughter. You meant to leave me with nothing while you and Alma started a new life together." He flinched at the accusation. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Explain to me how conspiring to commit fraud was actually something innocent." Before he could answer, Alma appeared beside us. She looked as bad as Victor, her usual polished appearance replaced by obvious stress and exhaustion. "Both of you need to stop this," she said urgently. "People are watching." She was right. Several guests had noticed our conversation and were listening with obvious interest. The drama of the Fallon divorce had been the subject of local gossip for weeks, and seeing all three principals together was irresistible entertainment. "There's nothing to stop," I replied calmly. "I'm just enjoying the party and catching up with old friends." "You're destroying our lives," Victor said, his voice rising slightly. "You destroyed your own lives when you decided to betray me. I'm just making sure everyone knows what kind of people you really are." "That's enough," Alma hissed. "We can settle this privately. We don't need to air our problems in public." "You made this public when you involved my business partner in your conspiracy. You made this public when you manipulated our daughter. You made this public when you filed fraudulent legal documents." The conversation was attracting more attention. Margaret Hendricks was watching from across the terrace, along with several other prominent members of the community. This was exactly what I'd hoped for, a public forum where Alma and Victor would be forced to defend their actions in front of their peers. "I never filed fraudulent documents," Alma said desperately. "Really? Then how do you explain the fabricated financial records? The false testimony you plan to give about my business practices? The conspiracy to void our prenuptial agreement through perjury? Those allegations are unproven. They're documented. I have recordings, photographs, and written evidence of everything you plan to do." Victor stepped closer, his face flushed with anger. "You've been planning this from the beginning, haven't you? You set us up." "I protected myself from your conspiracy. There's a difference. You recorded private conversations. You manipulated evidence. You've been playing games while pretending to be the victim. I documented crimes while they were being planned. I preserved evidence of fraud and conspiracy. I defended myself against people who were trying to destroy me." The crowd around us was growing larger. Someone had their phone out, probably recording the confrontation. By tomorrow, the entire town would know exactly what had happened between Alma, Victor, and me. "This ends now," Alma said, trying to regain control of the situation. "We're going to walk away, and you're going to stop harassing us." "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm simply telling the truth about what you did." "Your truth is biased and vindictive." "My truth is documented and verifiable. Would you like me to play the recordings for everyone here? I have them on my phone." The threat was enough. Alma grabbed Victor's arm and started pulling him toward the exit. But Victor resisted, his anger overcoming his judgment. "You think you've won," he said loudly. "You think you've destroyed us. But everyone here knows what kind of man you really are. Vindictive, manipulative, obsessed with revenge." "And what kind of man are you, Victor? The kind who betrays his best friend? The kind who conspires to commit fraud? The kind who breaks into houses when his schemes fall apart?" The crowd murmured at the mention of the break-in. Not everyone had heard about Victor's arrest, and the revelation sent a ripple of shock through the gathering. Victor lunged toward me, but several guests stepped between us. "You bastard," he shouted. "You've ruined everything." "You ruined everything when you decided to betray me. I just made sure there were consequences." Security guards appeared and escorted Victor off the property. Alma followed, her face burning with humiliation. The party guests watched them leave, then turned to me with expressions of sympathy and support. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," I told the crowd. "I never wanted our personal problems to become public, but sometimes the truth needs to be heard." Margaret Hendricks approached me as the crowd dispersed. "Cedric, after what I just witnessed, I think it's clear that Alma's suspension should become permanent. The firm can't be associated with this kind of behavior." "I understand completely. Professional reputation is everything in the legal field." As I drove home that night, I reflected on the evening's events. The public confrontation had served its purpose perfectly. Alma and Victor had been exposed as conspirators and criminals in front of the very people whose opinions mattered most to them. Their social and professional reputations were now completely destroyed. But more importantly, they had revealed their true characters under pressure. Victor's violent outburst and Alma's desperate lies had shown everyone exactly what kind of people they were. No amount of legal maneuvering could repair the damage they'd done to themselves. The war was over. I had won completely and decisively. Alma would never practice law again in this town, and Victor would never recover his social standing or professional reputation. They had tried to leave me with nothing, and instead they had left themselves with nothing. As I pulled into my driveway, I smiled for the first time in months. Justice had been served, and revenge had been completed. The people who had betrayed me were now paying the full price for their treachery. Tomorrow I would begin rebuilding my life, but tonight I would savor the satisfaction of a mission accomplished and enemies defeated. They had wanted to destroy me, but in the end they had only destroyed themselves. The recording on my phone captured their own words. "We will leave him with nothing." But as I sat in my truck, looking at the house I'd kept and thinking about the assets I'd protected, I knew the truth. They were the ones left with nothing, and that was exactly what they deserved.